Bitch can't even swim.
I think it's fair to say that Capcom have been on a bit of a roll with the Resident Evil series as of late. It's kind of funny to think that a number of years ago the series was in real trouble. In 2012 we had the pretty dire Resident Evil 6 and Operation Raccoon City. But ever since 2015, Capcom have really put in the work, and it's really paid dividends for them as the series is now in a really good way, and we've had some really good games. We had Resident Evil Revelations 2, we had RE7 in 2017, and then last year we had the excellent RE2 remake. And now, hot on the heels of that, we now have a remake for Resident Evil 3, and it's kind of been a very interesting game to talk about with loads of people giving their opinions, so I thought, why not give mine? But before we do get into it, I have to establish a few ground rules.
All right.
So first of all, I want to say that there will be no comparisons to the original RE3, mainly because I've never actually played it. I played the original version of RE2, so I had some experience before I played that remake, but not this one. I'll be judging the game based on its own merits. Secondly, I will only be taking a look at the single-player portion of RE3. I have played a bit of Resident Evil Resistance, but not really a whole lot to give an opinion. I don't think I'll ever really do a review on it, so, don't hold your breath on that one. So, are we all cool on that? Let's get into it then.
All right. I'm in.
Resident Evil 3 puts you into the boots of Jill Valentine and Carlos Oliveira. At the start of the game, Jill is planning to escape Raccoon City due to a growing chance of a citywide infection and the fact that the evil pharmaceutical organization Umbrella are keeping tabs on her. But before she can do this, Umbrella sends a giant bioweapon to break into her apartment to try and kill her, which forces her to flee.
I don't have time to explain. You gotta get out of there right now!
All right, let me grab my...
It also now happens, as soon as she escapes into the city, that it's now mostly infected. So this forces her to ally herself with a group of mercenaries working under the banner of the Umbrella Biohazard Countermeasures Service. Carlos is actually one of these mercenaries. He's working under the belief that he was sent in to rescue survivors and help them evacuate from the city, but then he begins to realize that his employer may not exactly be on the level. Now, the Resident Evil 2 remake, I found that the writing in that game was not great. It felt like we were kind of going through the Cliff Notes version. It just felt very rushed. This kind of fares a bit better thanks to the stronger characterization of its two main stars. I absolutely loved Jill and Carlos, especially the interplay between them, because the dialogue feels very natural and it had me chuckle a few times. I actually especially love Jill's attitude in this one. She's not very trusting of Carlos and the UBCS at the start, and some of the lines she comes out with are brilliant.
Right, I think I know the building.
Really? Way to go, partner. One step ahead.
Not your partner.
The gameplay is pretty much the same as the RE2 remake, with a few small changes. The combat pretty much works the same. It even uses the same crosshair system that was first introduced in the RE2 remake. That might sound a bit weird the way I put it, but let me explain. How this works is that when you go into aim mode, your crosshair appears as normal, as you would expect from any third-person shooter, but if you stay stationary for a few seconds, the crosshair will start to pinch in, meaning that your shots will be more accurate, and you also have a chance of scoring a critical hit which will either kill the enemy or blow off a certain body part, depending on where you were aiming. Enemies still have the RNG aspect from the RE2 remake, where sometimes it will take 2, 3, or even 5 shots to put an enemy down, so there's still a certain risk to taking on an enemy. You have a decent few weapons to choose from. You start off with a pistol, and then you go up to a shotgun, grenade launcher, magnum. Carlos even gets an assault rifle during his sections. Some of them have different ammo types, like the grenade launcher, which takes different types of rounds, such as flame, explosive, acid, and mine. Mine ones are pretty fun to use, I'm not going to lie to you. You can craft these as well by finding different types of gunpowder and explosives, and you can also find attachments such as sights, stocks, and extended magazines, which improve certain aspects of each weapon, making them more effective. You're going to need these because there are quite the few formidable foes in Raccoon City. You'll of course encounter the typical zombies, but also versions of the zombies that sort of have like tendrils going out of their head and they've got like a glowing eye type thing that you need to shoot. Kind of reminds me of some of the enemies from Resident Evil 4 and 5. The Licker also makes an appearance as well. You also have these two hunter types. One kind of sort of reminds me of like a dinosaur type thing. It just like opens its mouth when it gets close to you, and that's when you're supposed to hit it. And then you have these lizard-like ones which have like an armored shell that you have to tear through before you can kill them. These guys can be quite annoying, but of course it would be remiss of me not to mention Nemesis. Now, before the game's release, a lot of people, including myself, were really hoping that Nemesis would follow in the footsteps of the revised Mr. X for the RE2 remake. Unfortunately, that hasn't quite happened. Nemesis in this game kind of reminds me of some of the boss enemies from The Evil Within, where they would chase you in these big scripted moments before you would take them on in a big showdown. It's a lot like that. You'll have sections where he just chases you along a particular path until you reach a certain point where you lose him, or you'll take him on directly in a boss encounter. The only time you actually get an indication of what might have been is the first time you encounter him after the opening, where he actually stalks you for a bit. You actually get to witness his moveset. He moves faster than Mr. X, he can jump right in front of you to cut off your escape, he can shoot out tendrils to catch you and throw you to the ground. Oh yeah, and he packs quite the mean wallop. Like with Mr. X, you can damage him enough to be downed for a few seconds. If you pull this off, you do get an item for your troubles, but you won't really ever need to do this. There might be a few moments where he might block your way and you'll need to take him down, but it won't happen that often. I'll admit for a first time playthrough, this can be still thrilling and tense, but it kind of loses something, obviously, the second time you go through it, because you've already seen his bag of tricks, and there isn't really anything more. It is disappointing for sure. Speaking about Nemesis gives me the chance to quickly discuss the new defensive maneuver added into this game, which is called the Quick Step. This is performed by pushing the left analog stick in tandem with pressing the R1 button. Both characters perform this move in different ways. For example, Jill will do a little sidestep to avoid the enemy, whereas Carlos will do a more offensive shoulder charge. There is a particular reason of this, which I'm going to explain now. If you perform this move as an enemy is about to grab or attack you, you will end up doing what they call a perfect dodge. Jill will do a full-on combat roll past the enemy, and Carlos will do a pretty awesome Chris Redfield-inspired haymaker, which just sends the enemy flying. It gives you a bit more room. The other benefit to doing this is that if you go into aim mode after performing the perfect dodge, you'll go into slow-mo for a few seconds, allowing you to plug the enemy with a few shots, essentially getting the drop on them. This is a very handy little trick, and it certainly saved my life a good few times. I am aware that this does present the opportunity for exploitation. If you get really good at the timing, you can really use this move to take down most enemies without breaking a sweat. It also makes some of the boss encounters quite easy, again, if you get good on the timing. Personally, I never hit this problem because I could never get the timing down. I'm terrible at timing-based stuff. I mostly nearly got myself killed trying to do it. It kind of saved my life more when I really needed to use it, so if I was like backed into a corner and I'd have to use it to get out, it did save my life. So I do like this move overall, and yeah, it saved my life a good few times when I pulled it off. Looking at the other aspects of gameplay, the exploration remains the same as the RE2 remake. You'll search each area for supplies and also look for key items that will allow you to progress to the next area. Inventory management is still a thing in this game. You start off with very few spaces in your inventory, so you have to be smart with what items you take. You'll get access to safe rooms, which will allow you to save and store items in the boxes there, and you can also find hit pouches during the course of your adventure, which will increase your inventory spaces. You'll also solve the occasional puzzle, and I do mean occasional. I could count all of the major ones on one hand. They're also pretty easy. It won't take longer than a minute to solve them. The only other puzzles you'll really encounter, if you could call them puzzles, is to look for a note, is to open saves by looking for a note or something that has the combination. Those were also in RE2, and that's kind of it. Now, this is kind of a bit of a complicated one for me, because personally I'm not the best at puzzles in these types of games. So there's a part of me that sort of isn't really affected by this, but I do understand that they're needed to break up the gameplay because as a result of this, RE3 is definitely a bit more combat focused than the previous game.
Okay, now the fun shit begins.
The areas that you go to are also smaller in scope than the RE2 remake. You'll definitely be spending less time in each area. The game certainly has a brisk pace to it. As a result, the game is short in length, which isn't anything unusual even for the classic games, but yeah, it is short. I kind of do have to mention that. I finished it in just under 4 hours, around, well, 3:59. I was off by a minute, to be exact. Your second playthrough will obviously be even quicker. I mean, to give an exact time for mine, it was around 2:53. For me personally, I didn't mind the length because I enjoyed what I played, but I do understand that this will be a sticking point for a lot of people. To be fair to this game though, it does have replay value. There is obviously the lure of playing it on a higher difficulty, and I believe you can unlock an extra difficulty by beating it on the hardest difficulty. I can't really confirm that though, because I've not played it on the harder difficulty, but I'm pretty sure you can. I've seen people do it. And after you complete your first playthrough, you gain access to the in-game shop. You can buy costumes, unlimited ammo versions of certain weapons, early access to certain items like the lockpick, and buffs to your attack and defense. In order to earn points for the shop, you need to complete challenges. It's the same system that was first introduced in the RE2 remake. By just playing through the story and by completing certain actions and feats, you can unlock concept art and character models to look at in the bonus menu, and of course you earn points. It's a nice little incentive to play through the game again. I certainly thought so anyway, because I did.
Right, let's do this.
If there's one thing about the RE3 remake that I can't fault, it's the presentation. The game once again runs on the RE engine, which was first introduced in RE7, and like all the other games that have used the engine so far, it's really managed to blow me away again. The game looks absolutely drop-dead gorgeous. Character models are fantastically detailed, and the animation, both in-game and in cutscenes, is polished to a mere sheen thanks to some really well done motion capture. The environments also look fantastic. When you first step onto the streets of Raccoon City, you'll be dazzled by the fantastic details, such as the colourful neon signs above the stores, and the really well-modelled interiors. And this standard is throughout the entire game. The interiors look absolutely fantastic. There's some really good texture detail as well. Now I should mention I played this via the PlayStation 4 Pro on my 4K TV, which gave me access to a sharper image and HDR, although strictly you don't need a PS4 Pro to access HDR. If you have a regular PS4, you can get that as well. But if you have a 4K display or a TV that supports HDR, you are in for an absolute treat, because with HDR alone, the image just looks incredibly vibrant. It looks incredible. There's a decent degree of customization with the HDR as well, and obviously if you're playing it on a 4K TV, you get access to an upscaled image, and it looks a lot sharper. It's quite nice. The sound is also flawless across the board. The voice acting is also it's really, really good, and the music is also excellent, as you would expect. I didn't run into any game-breaking bugs throughout my playthrough. The game never crashed. The only kind of glitches I saw is enemies would occasionally clip through certain objects, but this also happened in the RE2 remake, so that's kind of it. The frame rate was also really solid. It aims for 60 frames per second, and for the most part it hits it. You'll see the occasional drop, but nothing too serious.
Alright, Super Cop. Here you go. We can use this to stay in contact.
I know what a radio is.
The Resident Evil 3 remake is going to remain as one of the more divisive entries in the series. It's definitely more linear in nature, you don't spend as much time in each area, there aren't that many puzzles to solve, it's not particularly long, and Nemesis is a bit more scripted than we would have liked. On the other hand though, the writing and characters were much better in this one than the RE2 remake. I still thought the core gameplay was very engaging, the combat's still very satisfying, the exploration is still fun, there's still a good bit to see and find. The game still has replay value thanks to the higher difficulties and the challenges, which give you bonuses and points for the in-game shop. Nemesis is still thrilling to take on for a first-time playthrough, and the presentation is flawless, and the game doesn't have anything, it's not buggy, and the frame rate is really solid. In the end, it is a tough one to score, but I'm going to give the Resident Evil 3 remake a 7.5 out of 10. I think it's a very solid entry into this well-revered series, and if you liked the RE2 remake enough and you're willing to overlook a few issues, I think you'll like what you'll play here. So I think that's going to cut it for today. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all have a fantastic day, and I hope that I get to speak to you all again soon. Take care, everyone.
Come on, let me in, you piece of shit.
No voice match found.